Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. Welcome back to a brand new match preview on the channel. Hope you guys are keeping well. The weather is still absolutely beautiful here in Wolverhampton. I mentioned that a couple of times this week. And of course, the football under Vitor Pereira has improved a lot like this weather. We're in a good position right now. Safety is pretty much secured. And now Wolves can maybe start to look up the table. Some interesting games coming up. We play Spurs this weekend, which we're going to be talking about. Of course, we've got Manchester United, then Leicester the following weekend as well. So really intriguing fixtures where Wolves do have the potential and the opportunity to climb up the table. Some really juicy news from Vitor Pereira's pre-match press conference, which we will get into as well. And of course, we have the opposition perspective later on in the video too. But yeah, it was a really successful weekend last time out for Wolves against Ipswich Town, coming from behind to beat Kieran McKenna's side and ultimately, secure survival in a dramatic way. Two fairly late goals. We saw the celebrations with Andre and the iPhone, which, I think is going to be iconic for a long, long time. But now it's been really important, and Vitor made a point of this, to make sure the players don't really go on the beach and make sure they remain focused to help Wolves climb up the table. It's been a long, long time since Wolves have had a really strong end to a campaign, and I really think the struggles of the last couple of years when Lopetegui was brought in and then initially when Vitor has been brought in are due to poor momentum the season before. So if Wolves can end this season on a high and really take that sort of winning and maybe not losing mentality into the new season, I think that will actually have a really positive effect on things that we can do in the summer, but also going into a brand new league season, to hopefully kick off and continue where you left off the previous season. So the big news in the pre-match press conference, though, with Vitor Pereira today, you knew that he was going to be fired and peppered with questions about Matheus Cunha. And to be fair, I thought that maybe we would see quite a political response from Vitor in regards to saying not yes and not no. And maybe most of this video was going to be me speculating whether he should start or shouldn't start, or whether I think he should or shouldn't start. But Vitor was very upfront. He started off the quote by saying how committed and how hard-working Matheus has been, and then said, but. And I knew straight away that but probably meant that he wasn't going to be in the starting lineup. But he gave full credit to those players, that have helped us win the last 3 games. With 4 games unbeaten without Matheus Cunha. And Vitor Pereira made that pretty clear. He said, we've won the last 3 games. Everyone has been really switched on in terms of how they're playing, their mentality, their focus. And he said it'd be extremely unfair to change that team. So he's pretty much confirmed what the starting lineup, barring any injuries, he's confirmed what that starting lineup is going to be. Now, some people think that's maybe a little bit naive, going into a game and pretty much putting all your cards on the table. And Ange Postecoglou, the Spurs manager, can look at that and think, oh, okay, so we know exactly how they're going to set up. But ultimately, for me, I think it stops any speculation over the weekend. The players completely know where they stand. And us as fans can focus now on the team on Sunday. So, like I said, I fully back Vitor's decision. Firstly, I mean, you would have heard my points on previous videos or on the podcast that I haven't really agreed with how Matheus has handled things. And I'm fully backing Vitor in his decision here. And I think certain decisions that he's made, the handling of the Mario Lemina situation for one, the Craig Dawson situation is a funny one, but I think both parties, probably from Craig's side and Vitor and the club side, they've handled it well in the fact that it's not really gone public, and as far as we're aware, it's not really gone sour publicly. And I think, they've handled that quite well as well. And this one as well, I think he made his point pretty clear in January when Matheus wasn't really given 100% against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. And I think, obviously, whatever he said this week, will be interesting and it may well work. But I think still to have the quality of Matheus Cunha, as long as he's still in the game or even leading in the game, to have the quality of Matheus Cunha coming off the bench on Sunday will be quite a bit of a luxury, to be honest. And look, I haven't agreed with what he said, but I can still, see that he is a phenomenal player and appreciate that he's been a phenomenal player for Wolves. So I will give him support on Sunday if and when he comes on. Hopefully we don't hear any boos or jeers or so on. But, I will still support him whilst he's on the pitch, and as long as he gives 110% for Wolves. In terms of team news, obviously we know what the starting 11 will probably be, but no other major injuries or doubts. Vitor did say that Pedro Lima twisted his ankle earlier on in training, so you would assume he's not going to be part of the matchday squad on Sunday against Tottenham Hotspur. And Spurs themselves have had a really, really strange season. Probably poor for their standards, to be honest. They want to be normally competing towards the top end of the table to get that European qualification. Now, really, their only hopes of European qualification are in the Europa League. Now, they played last night, which was Thursday evening, and drew 1-1 with Eintracht Frankfurt, which I think may well play into our hands a little bit, because all their focus now, their main goal, really, is to get into Europe, and the only way they can do it is winning the Europa League. So a lot of their focus, I would assume, is going to be on the second leg next week. So hopefully that may well mean we see a rotated team, or maybe a slightly out of focus Tottenham on Sunday, because obviously they've got the second leg next Thursday. And same goes for Manchester United. We've obviously got them next Sunday, Easter Sunday. We may well see a little bit of rotation or fitness issues with them as well. But I like Ange Postecoglou. I think maybe the way he's dealt with things behind the scenes and with fans hasn't been great. I can imagine how bad the Wolves social media would be if Ange was in charge at Wolves. But I do like Ange, and I think Spurs have got some great players, so we can't take us just going into this game and getting points for granted. It's still going to be a tough task for Wolves. Some of the stats that you will see popping up on the screen throughout the video, and that I'll talk to our guest about shortly, do bode well for Wolves. We've had really good form at Molineux. And just at the moment, I know it's only 4 games unbeaten. And against 4 teams, probably you'd still back us to be winning or getting points against. But that mentality of not losing games really does give you a little bit of jump in your step again. And I really do think we can give Tottenham a really tough test on Sunday and potentially go and grab all 3 points. Because if we can, it would be amazing to see Wolves finish in this league table above 17th place. We've not been above 17th place at all this season from game week 1 to now. So if we can start winning games like this, if we get something against Manchester United, you would hope that we can beat Leicester. All of a sudden, Wolves are going to be looking in a much, much better place. But look, lots of positivity going into this game. It's nice to be clear exactly what Vitor wants to do ahead of Sunday. And we'll now, of course, move on to our opposition perspective. Firstly, apologies for last week's opposition perspective. For some unknown reason, my audio was all over the place. I'm hoping that it's fixed and not the case for this week's as well. But it's been a pleasure to speak to Ben Bowman, who is a massive Spurs fan, to get his thoughts on the current situation at Spurs. I will be asking him about Cunha as well and what he thinks going into Sunday's game at Molineux. So then, guys, it's great to have Ben alongside me here to talk all things Spurs going into this game at Molineux on Sunday. Ben, first of all, thanks for jumping on, man. How you been keeping?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. I'd rather not be talking about Spurs if I'm being honest for how things have been, but I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, it's an interesting game, this one, and I mean the season for Tottenham has been a little bit frustrating, to say the least. I mean, Wolves have had quite a poor season, but Spurs, I mean, we're only 5 points behind you, and I'm sure the expectations for you guys was much, much higher. What's gone wrong for you, do you think, so far this season? I know you had quite a batch of injuries towards the opening stages of the season, but I mean, it just seems to be quite toxic there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Ange said after the game last night, we missed a couple of chances and we're a bit unlucky, and he said something like, the football gods just haven't been on our side this season. He's like, I've been trying to reach out to them, but they've just changed their number. And it's like, I do appreciate the kind of like almost the gallows humour of it. And like, we have been unlucky at points this season of like, injuries. But then again, a lot of other teams have had it, and I think the problem is with Tottenham is with the intensity in which we do train and we do play. Some of those injuries have been self-inflicted, and the management of the squad hasn't exactly been the best this season. But again, like I said, other teams have had that as well, and it's just probably as a result of the amount of games that we've had to play. And I don't think we probably were prepared well enough, despite the fact that I was quite excited about what we did in the summer in terms of bringing these young players through the door. I don't think we really prepared ourselves well enough for the season in hindsight. In terms of managing that Thursday, Sunday kind of schedule. And obviously we've gone deep into the Europa League as well, which, hasn't helped with that, but it's obviously given us a platform and opportunity to try and win a trophy. So that's the thing. This season can end in a positive positive way, despite where we might finish. But there's been a lot. I mean, again, I think the first few months of the season, I was really excited about what we were doing. I thought we'd kind of developed a little bit from last year. I thought we started to get found out in terms of what Ange wanted to do and how he wanted to play towards the back end of last season. And I think we really struggled with that. Still finished fifth. It was a good season. We probably should have finished in the top four, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously we had injuries last season, which, hit us quite hard as well. But this season it's gone from bad in that aspect to worse. And actually, I really liked the way we came out at the start of the season. And I think we'd evolved a little bit as a team. I thought he'd made some interesting tactical tweaks. Certain players were coming to the fore that weren't necessarily doing so last season. I think a lot of Spurs fans have said it, but it's almost like the Spurs this season our ceiling has got higher, but our floor's got lower. And I think we failed to establish any kind of real consistency. And look, there's been factors above Ange as well, like in terms of the board, in terms of not acting quickly enough in January, that have kind of held us back as well. And I think a lot of that frustration from the Spurs fans towards the board and Daniel Levy is valid. I also think we have to look at the manager himself. And I've been a big fan of Ange for a long time, and I've kind of stuck with him a lot longer probably than maybe some Spurs fans have. But I think over the last sort of couple of months or so, I think it's probably become, unfortunately, clear for me that we maybe need to make that change in the summer to kind of progress forward again. It's been a real whirlwind season, it has, because it's just like we've had, in and amongst the chaos, like we've had some really good moments and really good results. And we've had some games where we've just really been unlucky, but we've also had some games where it's just like, I don't really know if these players know how they're being asked to play. It's just it's a mess, and I think that's what I think the problem is with Ange Ball to an extent. Despite the fact that I think we can be a really good side in our day, I think a lot of things kind of have to come together for it to really, really work. Yeah. But when it does work, it's like the exact type of football that you'd want to play alongside winning things. Like if you could dream about your team winning things in this certain fashion, I think it's that way. I know a lot of fans probably won't care; they just want to win. But like in an ideal world, like everybody wants to play that kind of football. But I think so much of it has to so many things have to fall into place for it to work. It's kind of a bit like a house of cards. Once one thing goes, once the press is a little bit off, it's all about these kind of tiny details. Or once we maybe lose a couple of players that are so key to the way we play, especially the centre halves who have been without for so long up until now, it kind of all falls apart. So it's been a roller coaster, and I really, I'd love nothing more for Ange to be able to prove people wrong, win the Europa League, and go again next year. But it's hard to envision that. So it feels like the season might end in quite a meak way, unfortunately.
Do you think that's the only way he can keep his job if he wins in Europe, or do you think is there a world where he continues trophyless and Europeless next season?
I'd be surprised. I think he has to win it. I think he does. I think there's a lot of, don't believe everything you read, but there's been a lot of stuff that's been coming out about Spurs kind of having XYZ manager on their radar if Ange was to go, and it feels very much like the kind of line from the media is that he has to win this. He actually referenced it in the press conference the other day, which I thought was quite funny, and he said to one of the journalists, he was like, "Oh, you've been saying that I've got to win the Europa League to keep my job." And it was like, I'm not digging you out, but it's like it's what you said. So it was like, I tend to kind of just ignore it. But I don't think the only thing is, though, I feel like some of the things that he's been saying in the press, and maybe some of the way that he's been acting a little bit recently as well. It feels like he knows that he might be a dead man walking as well. I think that's kind of coming off a little bit. He seems to be biting on a few more things, and he seems like a manager that is reading every single thing about him, and it might be getting to him a little bit. And look, I think he's got to. I think he's got to win it. Even then, they might pull the trigger, but I doubt it. I think for a club like Spurs who haven't won a trophy in such a long time, for him to actually be able to deliver that, I don't think we're necessarily in a position to do that and say, yeah, thanks for that, we're going to kick on. But then again, that might be the right thing to do because we're going to be in the Champions League again next year. If we do win the Europa League, can Ange manage Champions League football alongside Premier League football and actually make it all come together and work without significant backing, which is something that Tottenham, we've spent money, but it's something that we've kind of failed to do properly. Yeah. Especially since we've moved to the new stadium. So who knows whether that could work next season if we do win it. But yeah, it's funny how things change in football very quickly. And if he was to win it, then a lot of Spurs fans might kind of flip back to being like, actually, you know what, let's give him another year. I think you kind of would have to. It's a really weird position to be in. Yeah. But I think it is kind of all or nothing in terms of the Europa League.
It's funny with Ange because when he first came in, he was like really this likable guy with the way he approached like press conferences, the way he was speaking to people, and then all of a sudden now things aren't going so well. He's sort of being the same way, but he's almost coming across. I don't know. He's snapping a bit more at people now and so on. And I don't know if you've seen, we've got with Vitor Pereira, obviously we're getting positive results. He's out going to pubs with Wolves fans and stuff like that. And he was out late last Saturday after we beat Ipswich. I do worry that at some point, because we're not going to stay unbeaten for the rest of his time at Wolves, there is going to be a point where we start losing football matches. Yeah. And how then is like, people are going to turn on him and say, well, you're not going out to the pub anymore, are you? Like, and I think it's a similar sort of thing with Ange, where really likable guy, and then slowly it's turned, and all of a sudden, it would probably wind me up as a fan when things aren't going your way, and then he's biting at fans or celebrating at fans or whatever. I think he's sort of making a rod for his own back at times, I suppose. Quickly going back to his sort of play style, Ben, do you think that's him overcomplicating things? Do you think that's him not having the personnel to play the way that he wants to play? Or do you think it's a little bit of a mix of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that I think his use of some of the players this season in particular has been quite frustrating. I think continuing to persist with using someone like Heung-min Son as more of a touchline winger when it's clear that he's lost that bit of sharpness and that kind of burst of pace and ability to beat a man. It was, I don't know if you watched the game against Frankfurt last night, but it was incredibly frustrating. He just looked like a player that's kind of confidence has been shot to bits. It's maybe so his profiling of certain players has maybe been wrong. I think at times as well, playing with two wingers like Brennan Johnson and Heung-min Son, who, especially with the stage of his career that Son is in, and to be fair, I think he's been like it for the most of his career, he's definitely more of like a final action kind of player. And that is very much what Brennan Johnson is as well. So we are quite predictable when we play the ball out to the wide areas if you're playing both of them on the pitch, because when Son gets it on the left-hand side, it's quite clear that Johnson wants to make that movement into the box, but Son hasn't really got that confidence to beat a man, and that's the same with Brennan Johnson. So we're not really fashioning the sort of opportunities that we probably want to be in Ange's ideal kind of, in terms of his style of play and philosophy. So I think, and there's also been I think certain players haven't really been used enough as well. I think we've brought in Matheus Cunha in January, and that's been a real frustration that this is someone that we've apparently got a 60 million buy option on. It's still up in the dark as to whether we're going to exercise that buy option. I don't think we've seen anywhere near enough of him because he hasn't been given anywhere near enough of an opportunity. So I think his reluctance maybe to kind of try different things and use certain players has been a bit of a frustration as well. And also I think we've kind of been, like I said earlier, I think as much as I really wanted this to work, I think we've probably kind of been found out a little bit. We've become easier to play through. I think because of the physical demands that this system kind of has and the toll that then takes on the players, our press is so much more ineffective. It's quite easy to play through when you're playing out from the back. It all feels a little bit disjointed and we're kind of leaving ourselves more vulnerable as a result. I think, like I said earlier, the big thing with Ange isn't necessarily, it's not his philosophy at all, because I think his philosophy is fantastic. And I think a lot of fans would want their manager to kind of come and have this quite clear blueprint of how you want to play exciting attacking football. I've said it for a while. I think a club like Tottenham, and this goes for the manager that we're going to hire after Ange, whether it's next season or the season after or whenever it is. I think Tottenham should be a club that has this blueprint of wanting to play attacking, positive football. So I think the fans definitely took to that. But I think there is so much of and I think in the media, like with Ange a lot, it gets, because it's all about the kind of the headlines and stuff. It's all like it's too naive. Stop playing out from the back, all this kind of stuff. You're putting yourselves under pressure. It's not as simple as that. I think it's all about the kind of minor details. And once, like I said, it's kind of the house of cards. Once one thing starts to go, the system kind of starts to fall apart a little bit. And I think he has to look at himself and take responsibility for that. It's actually kind of why I feel, despite the result last night and despite the fact that our away record in Europe is poor, I kind of fancy us in Europe a little bit more, because teams haven't really haven't had as much of an opportunity to figure us out, because they're not playing against us week in, week out, or not kind of picking up on things as much. And maybe his start, in the European performances recently, Ange ball has started to come back a bit more against AZ Alkmaar in the last round. Again, probably poorer opposition in relative terms to the Premier League. Frankfurt are third in the Bundesliga, but again, it's really congested around there. They've not been that great recently. In fits and spurts in those games, it's really started to kind of come back, but it's in the Premier League where it's been so far off it. And maybe that's because the players are struggling with the motivation in the Premier League, because there is literally nothing to play for, and they're kind of on the beach for that aspect, and maybe they're saving it all for the Europa League. And I think we have seen an uptick in performances there. But yeah, I think that maybe lack of flexibility tactically as well has definitely hurt him. And I think that's one thing that's been labelled at at him in terms of not wanting. We're going to play the same way no matter the opposition, which again. He's gone away from at points this season. Like when we beat Brentford away from home, it was very much like backs against the wall. We're kind of going to bunker in and hit them on the counter attack, and it worked. I don't want to see us play like that every week, but I do want to see us be a little bit more when the chips are down. Like we need a result here. Let's be a bit more gritty. Whereas the league performances over the past couple of months it's been so uninspiring and so flat. And yeah, I think I don't know. It's I think there's a multitude of factors as to why it hasn't worked out for him. But I think Andrew's kind of got to look at himself for a lot of them.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the Europa League there a couple of times. Obviously, this fixture falls in between the first leg and second leg.
Yeah.
1-1 draw in the first leg. Do you think there's going to be a lot of focus now, rather than this game, looking ahead to the second leg? Do you think there'll be any rotation? Or do you think, like, mentally there could be the players, like you mentioned, their Europa League performances seem to be okay, whereas Premier League performances have dropped off a little bit? Do you think Wolves could have a slight advantage in that?
I think so, because I think you've got more momentum coming into this game anyway. Again, you're kind of obviously with Wolves, touch wood, you guys are safe now, I'd say as well. So the confidence and the kind of it's not necessarily a do or die kind of game for you guys, and I think maybe playing without that sort of pressure might help you guys a little bit as well. But also, I think Ange will. It's interesting. I was just trying to find the quote then of what he said as regards to like rotation for Thursday. It sounds like he's going to have more of an eye on. For Sundays, it sounds like he's probably going to have definitely an eye on Thursday, but I don't think he's necessarily going to go massively gung ho with the changes. Although we did see, even though it was before an international break, after we beat AZ Alkmaar in the second leg, we played Fulham on the Sunday after, and he made 7 changes in that game, and that we kind of really lost any sort of continuity and any sort of rhythm that we'd had from the Thursday. And it's difficult because, from a Spurs fan's perspective, you don't want to keep losing games in the league.
For sure.
So you kind of want to build that. You want to build this familiarity with the players again. You want to get them kind of, in terms of the patterns of play. You want these players, if you're going to execute this game plan on Thursday and go and win the game away in Frankfurt, is it the right thing to do from a Spurs perspective to go and make a load of changes for Sunday? Or is it better to kind of be a little bit more conservative with it, make some in certain areas, give certain players a rest, but give the players also an opportunity to kind of play themselves into a little bit more form ahead of Thursday? But I think it probably gives Wolves a little bit more of an advantage, like anyway, because I think you're probably more confident going into it. But I do think we'll rotate a bit, but I don't think it will maybe be as much as we've seen around some other Europa League games.
And then in terms of Andrew's future, I mean, you mentioned there's probably, I think I've seen Glasner's name mentioned quite a lot over the last couple of days. I mean, out of those that have been mentioned, is there anyone that you're sort of leaning towards if it was a situation where Andrew was to be moved on?
Thomas Frank is the one for me. I think Iriola is the one that's been kind of really... Glasner, there was a rumour about Glasner the other day. Coming
so
from
yesterday they agreed it or something like that on Sky Sports Germany or something like that.
It was a bit of a weird one. It kind of came out of nowhere, and then no other sources kind of really followed up with it. So it's it's hard to know. I'm sure Glasner is someone that they're probably looking at. Obviously, Leipzig are looking at him as well. I think he's a very good manager. Iriola is the one that probably seems the most likely. I think his name seems to be popping up a lot. And while I do like Iriola, and I think he's got a high ceiling as a coach, I would like to see him prove himself over a longer period of time at Bournemouth if Spurs were to kind of take that, because I do think, again, Bournemouth have had similar issues to us in terms of injuries this season, very high intensity style. And again, I think people look at Bournemouth and look at Tottenham and think because their principles of both managers are kind of built around high pressing. I think a lot of fans from the outside looking in would look at it and say, well, Ange and Iriola are quite similar, so it'd be quite a seamless transition if Iriola was to get it right. I think there'd be a lot more work that would be needed to be done with Iriola than people maybe realise in the summer. And I think he's got a lot to prove as a coach, although I do really like him. And again, this isn't just saying this because Bournemouth have kind of gone on a run of not winning in 8 games, although that has kind of made some red flags start to appear a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I think Thomas Frank is the one that I'm really interested in him, because again, when Brentford were in the Championship, I think he had this really, they were really attacking, really exciting to watch. So again, like I said earlier, I do want a manager at Tottenham who's like the principles fundamentally are about attacking football. And although we haven't really seen that a lot with Brentford in the Premier League, he has done what has needed to be done with the group of players that he's got and the lack of big funds maybe available to him to squeeze the most amount of juice out of the squad and improve a lot of players and make sure they're hard to beat so they can actually sustain their place in the Premier League, which has been incredibly hard to do. They were they, since they come up in 2021, they've not been relegated. Not a lot of other teams have been able to do that recently. It was only, I think it was the season after where it was Fulham, Bournemouth, and Nottingham Forest who were the only three teams that have actually since been able to come up and then stay up and stay there. And everyone else who's kind of come up has gone down since then. Brentford have done really, really well to kind of sustain this and grow. And I actually think this season, one thing you've seen with Brentford is I think they have evolved a little bit more as an attacking side as well. I think at home because they've kind of found their maybe place in the Premier League a little bit more now because they've been there for such a long time now, or a long time in kind of relative terms. They've gained a little bit more confidence, and I think you've started to see at home, especially, them really start to be aggressive, take a game to teams. There's really a lack of fear with Brentford now, and I think that's again testament to Frank's evolution as a coach. And again, he's made them in this second half of the season as well. He's made them very hard to beat away from home. They're good defensively. He's tactically flexible in games. Really good man manager. The sort of guy that you can definitely get behind from a personal point of view, I think, as well, to have as kind of the figurehead of the club. He just seems like he ticks more boxes for me than Iraola right now, just in terms of having a little bit of stability. A manager that is tactically adaptable, but can also play on the front foot. And I think that's one thing that another thing with Spurs managers recently is that I don't think you can necessarily say the managers that we've had in the last few years have actually improved many players at the football club. Whereas I think if you look at Thomas Frank and what he's done at Brentford, that's exactly what his game has been about, working with limited resources and improving the players that he's got. So I think, again, it's not necessarily the big flashy name that some fans might want, but we've tried that as well and it's not really worked. I think the problems at Spurs are definitely bigger than the manager. But I think in terms of getting that managerial appointment right, I think Frank would probably do that for me. I think there's other managers that I definitely would look at as well, but might be out of our league. There's some interesting options maybe in Europe as well if you want to take a punt on a younger manager. Farioli maybe as well. Sebastian Hoeneß at Stuttgart as well is another name that's kind of been mentioned, playing really good football over there. They've had a torrid time with injuries this season, to be fair, but last season they finished second in the Bundesliga ahead of Bayern Munich. He's a manager that I kind of got my eye on, but I think Frank is the one who I'm excited about. Whether it's going to happen or not, I'm not sure, but I think I do like him.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by Thomas Frank because I agree with a lot of those points. I do think that maybe he deserves a shot at a slightly bigger club. I'm amazed at how well he's done with Brentford. Never really been in the picture for relegation at all, or the conversation. I mean, the first year they went on a little blip, and I think they brought Christian Eriksen in, and they really kicked on after that. And I think even life after Ivan Toney as well. They could have really struggled after that. I think they spent the money on the replacement, but the guy got injured, quite a nasty injury.
Yeah, we've not even seen Igor Thiago. Yeah, we've not even seen him really.
So the fact that they'll be able to cope with that, and so I agree. And I think in terms of expectation, maybe he's going into that job. Obviously, there's always going to be high expectations at Spurs, but maybe you're not getting the likes of Antonio Conte, in where you're expecting like this high level of results every week. Of course, you want that under Frank, but I think he'll probably feel, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. I do like that. I do like that shout, to be fair. But we'll wait and see how Ange gets on between now and the end of the season. Before we finish off, Ben, obviously you would have seen the news about Matheus Cunha. You've done little bits of content on that as well, which I've caught previously. He is available for Sunday's game. However, I would have mentioned earlier on in my preview that Vitor Pereira has said basically he's not going to be starting. What's your thoughts on that, and what's your whole thoughts on the situation really as well?
Yeah, I found it really interesting, to be honest, over the last couple of weeks, because I don't think that Cunha has handled this situation that well at all, to be honest, and I don't really think it's been spoken about that much. I think a lot of rival fans, or maybe fans of Big Six clubs who are fans of clubs that will probably be circling around him in the summer, have kind of looked at it from a point of view that he's too good for Wolves and he should be able to demand a move out there. Look at how he's put Wolves on his back, etc., etc., etc. And that is a fair point, because although you've done really well without him after he's, kind of while he's been serving this ban after the Bournemouth incident, there's been performances where you look at him and just think he's carrying that team 100%. But I think the way that the thing that frustrated me was the way that people were talking about the new contract and people talking about the release clause. If Matheus Cunha had got his head down and carried on playing really, really well throughout now to the end of the season, kind of just kept his mouth shut a little bit, Wolves probably could have got more money for him than has actually been put into the release clause. So I don't really buy this thing of like he's done it to make sure Wolves get money for him, because he would have had 2 years left on his contract, I think, anyway. Yeah. He's done it to guarantee himself a move, and I don't really I don't really like that. Fair enough if you're going to do that. That's one thing, but also don't then sort of keep trying to come out and defend it as well and do these interviews and just draw more noise and attention to it. And in terms of, so for that, look, I think he's a really talented player. I do think in terms of his volatile personality at times, I think it would be a little bit of a risk for some of the bigger clubs. Part of me thinks with Cunha as well, although I love him as a player and I think he's a difference maker and I think he'd make an impact wherever he goes. I do wonder whether he would struggle to fit in at a club where maybe he's not the main man.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think, like I said, you've done brilliantly without him in the team over the course of the last month or so. But when Wolves, when he was at his peak earlier on this season, before that ban, a lot used to flow through Wolves from the outside. Sorry, a lot used to flow through him at Wolves from the outside looking in. And I wonder if he's not got that thing. I wonder if he goes to a club where not everything goes to flow through him. He's not really the main man. He's not the big fish in the small pond. No disrespect, but like tactically, I wonder whether he would struggle a little bit more, maybe somewhere else. But then again, he's got so many parts of his game that are just class. So maybe he would be absolutely fine. But in terms of the way that the managers handled it as well, like I saw that before we came on to chat, like in terms of him coming out and saying that he's not going to play. It's ballsy. I like it. Like although he's obviously done a lot to guarantee that you're not going to go down with the results earlier on in the season, at the end of the day, it's these players who have done that, really. Because I remember seeing a lot of Wolves fans the day after that, or the day of and the day after that Bournemouth FA Cup game, when I think the gap between you and Ipswich might have been 6 points or 5 points, I think it was. I saw a lot of Wolves fans panicking, sort of being like, okay, we know Ipswich are poor, but we've got to play them in about a month's time. The games that we've got in between now and then, with the uncertainty at the moment, they're not necessarily guaranteed wins. We could have really done with you, and it feels like you might have just plunged us back into a relegation battle a little bit. So it's testament to the players that have really actually stepped up and stood up during this time where it was not guaranteed that you were going to pull away from Ipswich like this. And that game last weekend was kind of really seen as like this huge game where things could really change. If Ipswich put a run of results together before that and you started to drop a few points, they could have leapfrogged you and then you're in a really sticky situation again. So I think it's testament to the manager of how he's kind of coached you through that, how the players, how they've stepped up without Matheus Cunha as well. And I like the fact that he's nailed his colours to the mast and just said, it'd be unfair to drop any player that might come in for him because they've stepped up for us. I do like that about Pereira.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult situation. I think the work rate at times off the ball for Cunha has been a little bit frustrating. I think the players that he's brought in, Marshall Monetzi, you'll see on Sunday, is such a intriguing footballer. Again, a very Marmite footballer, splits opinion a lot because his actual footballing ability isn't particularly great, but his work rate off the ball has been a huge bonus to Wolves. And that's why for Sunday, Cunha not starting, I'll be really interested because I think this is a really big test. Obviously, Tottenham are still a good team despite them struggling. They've got the individuals to cause Wolves some problems. I'm interested to see how he adapts to life without Cunha in this sort of situation, and even having him on the bench, it's going to be such a luxury to bring him on maybe half time or 65 minutes in, especially if we're in a comfortable position in the game. But no, I agree with your points, and obviously you did some content on it, and I agreed with those points there because I think really you bang on in terms of why he signed the contract, and I think Wolves gave him such a low release clause. Firstly, because he obviously wanted to move on, which is fine. But secondly, to make sure he didn't kick up a fuss between Jan and the end of the season, because they couldn't afford 100%. To be saying no to people. Him kicking up a fuss saying, I don't want to play for you. And all of a sudden his value shoots even lower. So I think, I agree. Even the Bournemouth thing, if he kept his head, he would have taken one of the penalties. Arguably, we would have won that game. Could have won trophies, which he made out that he wanted to do. And the interview at the time, he put that out basically and said he wanted to move on because we were safe. At the time we weren't. Results could have gone so differently over the last couple of weeks for us. So we are very fortunate that we're in the position that we're in. But it'll be interesting on Sunday for sure, mate. What's your score prediction, Ben, going into this game?
Well, I was just about to say I'm sure he'll come on and probably score the winner in the second half, and then he'll go up
everybody in the crowd.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's going to be an interesting game, really. Like I said, I think Ange will make a decent amount of changes, but not loads. our form in the league's been pretty poor. I think it'll be. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I don't see us going away and winning. I've got, we used to have quite a decent record at Molineux actually. When you guys first came back up, I think we won our first 2 games there. I remember going the first season you were back in the Prem and we were 3-0 up. And I think
it was 3-2 finish, wasn't it?
3-2. Was it Gibbs White came on and didn't he win both penalties as well? Gibbs White,
possibly.
Or we won one of them maybe.
Yeah,
and that was very nervy. And then we beat. It was like last minute Vertonghen win of the year after that. And then since then, I can't remember many games we've won at Molineux. So it's been a bit of a.
We were unbeaten in our last 4 against you, and I think we've won our last. We've won our last 2 games at Molineux against you.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
last
season
we had some good form against you. To be fair,
yeah, it's never a ground that I'm massively confident about going to. But I'll say 1-1. I think.
I think I'd take a point. To be fair, I think I'd take a point. But even a win for us would be huge, and I think that would put a hell of a lot of pressure on Ange going into Thursday as well. It's probably a needed pressure, but I think I probably would take a point. To be fair, Ben, thanks for jumping on, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been great chatting. Where's the best place people can catch you and your content if they wish?
You can find me on TikTok, just Ben Bowman. I've got a second account as well, Ben Bowman THFC, where I talk about mainly Spurs stuff, but some other bits as well. And then my YouTube channel as well, Ben Bowman. Just all Spurs content on there. So yeah, nice one. Thanks for having me on, mate.
No problem. I'll make sure I leave a link to those in the description. And then apart from Sunday, mate, all the best for the rest of the season. And hopefully I'll catch you next season as well.
Yeah, you too, mate. Nice one.
So big thanks to Ben. I'll make sure I leave a link to his socials in the description down below. Guys, let me know your thoughts. Let's try and smash the video first. Let's try and get 250 likes on this preview. And let me know your thoughts and score predictions as well in the description down below. Hopefully the weather remains like this. You can barely see out the window because it is that bright and it's beautiful weather. I think it is, we're over 20 degrees, which is unheard of for 3/4 of the year in England and in Wolverhampton. So lovely weather. If you're going out, I've drove past a few of the beer gardens. They were looking busy. Enjoy it. Stay safe, guys. And I'll catch you all after the game on Sunday. And fingers crossed we're celebrating 3 points.